I'd like to spend the first 10 minutes going over the main points of the product, and then I'd like to leave open a lot of time for questions and discussion with the audience that we have here today. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have a Q&A feature that we've left open in Zoom. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A and I will answer them after we're done going through this short presentation. And with that, I think we can load our first slide. So as we set the table for this conversation, I think it's helpful to talk about why test screenings are important in general, what problems they solve, and why they're important for the success of your, not just your film, but of your entire career. As you can see, illustrated by this first slide, once your film is out, it's out. There's no way to unrelease a movie. And the critical reception that your film receives is going to set the wheels in motion for how widely your film is viewed and how well it will perform. Now, there's been a lot of debate about whether sites like Rotten Tomatoes help or hurt box office in particular. You can see some dueling articles here coming out from Variety and Rotten Tomatoes themselves about whether it helps or hurts box office. At the bottom there, you can even see what was a public takedown from Martin Scorsese in The Hollywood Reporter. And meanwhile, in the bottom right, people on Google are asking, is 100% Rotten Tomatoes bad? So confusion abounds about its precise impact on the film. But the most current research into Rotten Tomatoes data finds that while studio tentpoles may be less affected at the box office, other films are still very much affected. And of course, with large budget studio movies, you have the big visual spectacle, you have the huge budgets, you have the A-list celebrities to draw attention to the theater. But once we're on a streaming platform, it's more of a level playing field. You're looking at an array of tiles and they're all competing on the same size screen for your attention. So in that setting, in that context, what rating your film receives actually has a huge impact on how we want to spend our time as consumers. And you can see as films move from in theaters and streaming day and date to streaming, it seems to matter even more. For independent films, that's the most likely scenario, right? Is that your film is going to go straight to streaming. So whether or not other people who've seen the film like it is really going to matter to consumers if they're going to take a risk on a movie that doesn't have names they recognize. But it isn't just how your current film performs that's affected by your Rotten Tomatoes score and other reception that your film receives. It has an impact on your career as well. Those of you who follow Filmonomics closely know that we released a massive study earlier in the year that looks at 10,000 feature film directors who each made at least one film over the past 50 years. And that study found that 2/3 of those directors never made a second movie. They only just made the one and they never got a second chance. So independent filmmakers are really incentivized to do everything they possibly can to have a successful first outing and live to fight another day. That's why most independent filmmakers like the idea of test screenings. It only makes sense that you'd want to test your film before it's out in the world to get a sense of how audiences would respond. And especially those of you who've been through the post process know that once you're in the edit, it can be very easy to sort of lose your orientation and lose sight of how certain moments are coming across or what may be confusing the audience. There are options out there, as you see by this slide. There's the physical screenings option, the large-scale virtual screening option, and then Garage. Most independent filmmakers use the Garage method, where they invite a bunch of friends over and they hand out makeshift surveys. But in all three examples, although the Garage method is more affordable, in all three examples, you're relying on unprofessional respondents to provide that feedback. So while they may have personal preferences about what worked or didn't work, what confused them or not, they won't be able to provide really actionable guidance on how it can be fixed, or even oftentimes why something isn't working for them. Our product solves those problems. Oh, I'll say one more thing about this. All three of these options that you have available to you, none have published any data on how accurate they are. So while you can leave your test screening virtual or otherwise and have a sense of how that particular audience responded, and maybe you even get a score, no company that's out there right now is publishing data on how their test screening scores align with Rotten Tomatoes scores or any other form of valid critical reception once the film is released. This is an overview of the top of our product, basically the scoreboard for our product, with some information about the 3 reviewers that made up these scores. And our screening analysis product really does solve all these problems. It solves the cost problem. And the last slide, while Couch is free, the other 2 examples cost, in many cases, tens of thousands of dollars, as you could see by those price tags. Booking a theater is not cheap. Our screening analysis product is virtual. It relies on 3 professional respondents that are on our Slated development staff, and it costs $4.95. So we've even had some filmmakers so far who submit multiple cuts in order to see how they compare. It's also done in private. It's confidential. All of our reviewers are under NDA. So you don't have to worry about the film leaking as you would perhaps if you use one of those virtual test screening companies that sends it out to 300 respondents across the country or across the world. Our system is very secure, and it goes to members of our development staff who we work with every day on high-profile projects and indie projects alike. And before we move on from this slide, I'll just point out, top left, you have the score box, so you can see how reader 1, reader 2, and reader 3 responded to this particular film. Those green boxes on the right indicate where categories averaged a 4 or higher. I colored in green. Where it was a 3, maybe those are opportunities to improve in the edit, and you can see that pacing and conflict were 2 such opportunities. Those things can oftentimes be improved in post. But the reviewers of this particular film felt that the fundamentals were really strong. Things you can't do over in post, like dialogue and craft and tone, received 4.0 averages, which is quite high. And the screening scores is 77, which is pretty awesome for an independent film. One of the questions people always ask is, who's watching the movies? We have a staff of about 30 people, not 300, 30 people on our team that we've been working with in many cases for more than 5, 6, 7 years. And here are bios of these 3 particular reviewers that reviewed this particular film. All of them you can see have a proven track record of picking great films with us. And in fact, that top reviewer has since gone on to, is directing a movie right now for an Oscar-winning distributor. So they are film professionals who are there to help you. And again, all of this feedback is confidential. Here's one example of a film that we did screening analysis for. It was reviewed by us in 2018, subsequently accepted at Sundance 2019. It received positive reviews from the reviewer, from the critics who saw it there, and was subsequently acquired by IFC at the festival. So although there's still a relatively small sample size of films, pardon me, I'm going to take a drink of coffee. Thanks for your patience. Although there's still a relatively small sample size of films that we've scored that have since come out, given the long life cycle of independent films and their release schedule, 100% of the films that we reviewed so far that got 75 plus screening scores have been rated fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. So this is not an unusual example. Taking a deeper dive into this particular example, I've put our Slated reviewers paragraph on the left, and on the right, we have a couple of examples of how film critics responded. And what's really interesting is one of our reviewers gave a 5 to tone, which is a fantastic signal every time we see that. That means the film is really working on an emotional level, whatever genre effect it's trying to have. And both in our reviewers' notes on the film, as well as in all the formal reviews that were written after the film was released, you can see some common themes coming up. One is that everyone was impressed with how subtly the themes of intimacy and the scenes of intimacy were portrayed. Nearly every review, and again, I'm just posting 2 here, but nearly every review talked about how seamless and immersive and authentic this was as a love story. And you can even see on our reviewers paragraph on the left and on RogerEbert.com's reviewer on the right, both talked about the film leaving a lasting impression after it was done. So again, this is truly you're peering into the future with screening analysis, because you are getting the opinions of people who do this for a living. They review films for a living, but for us, but they also often make films. They've had experience sometimes getting movies made, making films themselves, being responsible for films getting made, and they have experience in all different sectors of the film industry. So they truly are here to help and can give you a very, very accurate snapshot of how your film will be received while there's still time to make changes in post. We're not just providing feedback though. If your film scores well, if you receive a 75 plus screening score, you also have the option to work with our executive producer service team to get your film out to sales companies and distributors. Our team at Slated can help advise on strategy. We can work with you to strategically roll your film out to a community of sales companies. We have over 250 sales companies and distributors that we work with, and we can try to put together a cohesive strategy for your film so that you're not just blasting it out to festivals, getting passes, and then saying, what do I do now? In fact, there is an order of operations to this. There's a right way to go about it. Our team, having done many, many deals with films in post and getting them sales companies and distributors, can advise you on when to go out, who to go out to. And then once you have multiple offers that we've brought you from sales companies, can even advise on perhaps who might be the best partner for you, to talk through with, ask questions of them, to get a sense of what their strategy for the film would be. And then we can talk about what's the right market to launch at, what are the right festivals to submit to. In many cases, independent filmmakers will just, once they finish their film, submit to all festivals. And this isn't a great approach, because once you started getting rejected from festivals, as you often do if you're just a nameless, faceless submission, no matter how good your film may be, then the film starts to age and the value of the film starts to decline the further you get from your wrap date. So with Slated's executive producer team, we can make those introductions and we can put together cohesive strategies so that you're going to sales companies at the right time. And as a team, once you've picked your sales company, we're deciding what festivals to submit to and how we can leverage the sales company's relationships or the buyer's relationships to ensure that you debut at the right festival and then launch sales at the right market if that applies to your film. This is just a couple of examples of recent testimonials that we got from films that we were very fortunate to work on. So that is a very brief overview of the product and how it works, the main points around it. I'm going to, having opened up Q&A, I'm going to stop presenting now and start the discussion. Awesome. We have 2 questions to start. The first is from Eugene. He asks, how many features have you watched and scored so far? And what has been the range of scores as of today? That's a great question. We've watched about 50 films and about 14 or so of them have come out. We started offering screening analysis confidentially about a year and a half ago, unofficially about a year and a half ago. We hadn't sort of officially launched the product. As of this month, it's officially launched. And as more of the films that we reviewed come out, I'm pretty confident, having done scoring of films for a long time, that the predictive nature of the scoring is going to hold up. It only makes sense, right? So if you're familiar with Slated, you know that we've been reviewing scripts this way for over 10 years. We've reviewed over 10,000 feature scripts. Over 400 of those have been made and released. So we know that the correlation between the script score, which is almost an identical methodology, and the Rotten Tomatoes scores, to take an example, is very, very, very high. Anything that scores a 75 or higher at the script stage, all factors being equal, but again, we don't know anything about who's directing or who's starring or who's producing at that stage. Anything that scores a 75 at the script stage has 4 or 5 times a higher chance of being certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. So it only makes sense that if we're having the same team do the same process, knowing all of those production elements and being able to see the film, that our correlations are not just going to hold up, but probably be stronger. And that's what we've seen so far. So I can say, 100% of the films that have gotten 75 plus screening scores have been released are fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Most of those have gone to festivals. Within the films that scored between a 70 and 75, so low 70s, 3/4 of them have been rated fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. And in fact, the percentage of them that are not fresh received fresh audience scores. So in one way or another, your response from the Slated team of reviewers is going to indicate how your film is going to be received by critics and audiences. And we've seen this pretty reliably demonstrated in all the films that we've reviewed. Second question. From Barry, he asks, I have a half-hour film that I'd like to expand into a feature. Can I use this service for my current films to get insight for this? So this is a great question. And one thing that I'd like to say in thanking you for this question and welcoming others like it is that we've just launched this product and we're very open to feedback ourselves. We want to have a conversation with the filmmaker community about what's most useful to you. Obviously, our priority is making sure that our screening scores remain accurate and predictive. But I think there's a lot of ways to skin that cat. I don't like thinking about skinning cats, but I think to use that tired metaphor, I think there's a lot of ways to get it done. And so if you as filmmakers have things that you'd like screening analysis to do that it doesn't currently do, for instance, you want to submit a question, a specific question about whether or not this moment is clear in your film, those are things we're open to. So please, more questions like these, which I'll answer in just a moment. Give me more questions like these. We're going to keep track of all of the questions we get. Anytime there's multiple demands, or outsized demands for a new feature, a new bell, a new whistle, or a change to the product, we're going to take that very seriously and consider, can we execute it? How easy it is to execute? And is it something that's going to benefit the product as a whole? So we're definitely listening. And to answer your question, Barry, we're not set up to review such short content right now, but I would be willing to get feedback from our team on this and provide it to you in some form. So I don't know if we'll be able to do sort of a whole screening score, but we can definitely talk offline. I think there might be sort of a way that we can help you that we can think through together. So please reach out to us. Please reach out to us offline and we'll continue that discussion. We want to be helpful. To your point, a half hour is quite a ways short of feature length. We have seen some features that aren't quite, 2 hours long or aren't quite an hour and a half long. That can still sometimes attract distributors and sales company interest, but you are correct. Your instincts are correct that anything shorter than 85 minutes, you're getting into some dangerous territory there where distributors are just going to say no on the basis of the runtime. So absolutely worth having a conversation about what the best ways are to expand that half-hour runtime. Thank you so much. We have another question of whether or not this is available for documentary features, and that's something I should have touched on. Absolutely, it is. Narrative and documentaries. And it's been a very fun last year and a half, I'll say, because we have been working on narrative features for a long time. I'd like to say that, we're a very well-oiled machine when it comes to the questions we review for narrative feature mechanics. But in the past year and a half, we brought on Chris Rodman, who has an illustrious career in documentaries, not just in the US, but in Spain and other parts of the world as well. She has directed her own feature documentaries. She's worked on documentary series, and she developed for us an incredible approach to applying our methodology to cuts of documentary films. So for instance, there's no dialogue that is scripted in a documentary film. Instead of dialogue, we review visual approach in that case, which is of course very important for documentaries in order to keep that journey engaging. So we have a documentary team of people who review docs. They have experience reviewing docs. They've reviewed several already because I think there's a lot of demand for it. I would say probably a third of the submissions that we've gotten so far for screening analysis are documentaries, and we can absolutely provide analysis to documentaries. That data is looking like it's holding up every bit as strong as the narrative data, and we've already gotten some truly phenomenal documentaries reviewed that have scored quite well. So yes, absolutely. Please reach out to us about a documentary. We can review it as soon as there's a rough cut. So there doesn't necessarily need to be a totally finished cut. And we can't come in before there's footage, unfortunately. It's just too difficult to gauge from pitch materials. But as soon as there's a rough cut, we would love to take a look. Oh man, we have some great questions here. Okay, another question coming in asks, assuming you don't hit a 75 for your first test screening and then make changes and then you retest it and you land above a 75, how much does that first score have any impact on being eligible for EP services? Does it negatively, do the negative reviews from testers impact your retest? So that's a really good question. And the answer to that question is no. So each screening score or each set of analysis is done in a vacuum. So once you submit your film, you'll have 3 reviewers take a look at it. They'll each review the film independently, and you'll get your score back. If later you choose to submit another cut, if it's a narrative film, chances are you'll get 3 new reviewers, or potentially 1 returning reviewer and 2 fresh reviewers, and they'll deliver you a score based on that cut in a vacuum. So they're not referring back to the old cut. If we do have a returning reviewer, they may say to you, look, here are the things you did that really worked. Here are the things you did that were sort of a neutral, so that you can have a comparative example of what, how the changes you made are actually impacting the film moving forward or not. But the scores are done independently of one another. Once you have both scores on your film page, on your script or screening tab, you have the option to make scores invisible and make scores visible. So you can only show 1 screening score at a time. The same is true for script score. The others will be hidden. And Slated, for our part on the Slated ZP team, we don't care if scores on earlier versions of the film weren't quite as high, because that is the natural process of development. We've seen films that have been submitted to us at 65, 60 script scores come up 10, 15, even close to 20 points over the course of their development. And that's not only true for our platform and for our scoring process, but it's true all around the film industry. The first drafts of, there's a class taught at USC that I find really interesting that one of my friends helped teach about the first drafts of Oscar-winning movies. The professor passes out these first drafts, and oftentimes they're pretty rough, as you might imagine. M. Night Shyamalan talks about the Sixth Sense being entirely different for the first something like 8 or 10 drafts of that film. It didn't only occur to him what that movie was on the 10th or 11th draft. And we've seen the same thing reflected in our scoring. So absolutely, we want to encourage the process of iterating. That's what analysis is for. That's what we're here to help you do. So if you start at a 65 and you end at a 75, not only are we excited to work on the movie, but we're thrilled for you that you had a breakthrough in your development process. And we'll probably shout that out to the mountains, over the mountains, or whatever the phrase is, if you want that additional promotion, because we always like patting filmmakers on the back when they're able to make those gains. Another question here is, how about short films? We do not offer analysis on short films at this time. The main reason is that there isn't a market for it. Investors don't really invest in short films. It's usually friends and family, or the filmmakers themselves, that finance them. And there's no one really buying short films at the moment either. So we don't have, our platform is not set up for short films. That said, short films are fantastic as proofs of concept for feature films. So if you do have a feature version of the script, I highly recommend listing that film on Slated and using the short film on your film page as sort of a teaser or proof of concept. So in that sense, we would love to watch a short film, especially if it's an example of work that the director has done in the past and would like to expand into feature format. Another question is, can I submit a director's cut versus a producer's cut? Absolutely. And we've already seen this happen. So because our analysis is pretty reasonably priced at $4.95, and I'll add the asterisk that I'm not sure how long, given we spend 18 hours reviewing the film and offering analysis on the film, and right now we're probably going to go above and beyond that. I'm not sure how long the product will be priced at $4.95, but because it's literally a fraction of the cost of other test screening products out there right now, we've already seen filmmakers who are submitting multiple cuts of the same movie to see which version performs best. Those of you who've been in post know what this is like, right? Arguments happen in post, just like they happen in development. There may be a director's cut, there may be a producer's cut, there may be, well, it's usually those, but there may be multiple versions of each. There may be a scene or a turning point or an overarching structure for the film that we all just disagree about as a filmmaking team. So it's a really good way to put those arguments to rest and see once and for all which cut is performing better. And we're able to do that for you at a $495 price point for 1/10 of the cost of other screening services. You can find out not just if your cut is good, but which of your two cuts is best. Another great question. I feel so lucky to have so many great questions today. Thank you, everyone. Another great question is, have any of the films you scored found distribution yet or been released? And the answer is absolutely yes. So every film that scored well so far we've either helped them find distribution or they've found distribution on their own. And the examples in my last slide they were examples for Domino Battle of the Bones and for On Sacred Ground. Both of those films came to us in post. We offered screening analysis to them. They both scored well. And in both cases, we were able to find sales or distribution for those films. That pattern has held true of every film we've boarded in post as executive producers. So I would say we're probably working on maybe 10 or 15 films that are just in post right now. And having taken out completed films over the past year and a half, I will say we have 100% track record so far of getting at least one offer on every single film we've ever taken out. I just can't, I have to bask in that because it's so phenomenal. It's nothing that I would have guessed going into it. But in most cases, we have multiple offers on completed films that score well. And in 100% of cases, we have at least one offer. So the idea is that once you have a completed film, you're a filmmaker, it's very disorganized out there. There's online resources, but I was surprised how little guidance there really is online about what best practices are. And there's definitely a right and wrong way to do it. I recommend if you have a completed film, start with screening analysis, or if you don't have the budget for screening analysis, at the very least, reach out to us on our free, 5-day-a-week customer service chat and talk to us about your film. We can probably help. Yes, every film we boarded as executive producers have found offers from sales companies and distributors. And the ones that we haven't boarded, examples like Premature, which just submitted for analysis, and we had a discussion about financing. Other examples include The Novice, which I think was also bought by IFC, also debuted at festivals. There was another film that was recently bought by Saban that scored in the 80s and is getting a theatrical release in February. So whether we're on it as EPs or not, all of the high scoring films have had success with sales and distribution so far. Next question from Steve is, what is your turnaround time? It is 2 weeks. 2 weeks. So it'll say 10 business days at checkout, and that tabulates to around 2 weeks. Steve also asks another fantastic question. Thank you, Steve. These are points I should have covered. Do you prefer a fine cut or a rough cut or whatever? And the answer is any of those work. Our team is pretty used to reviewing films at the rough cut stage. So when you check out, you'll be able to tell us in your submission if you're at rough cut, picture lock without any VFX, for instance, or if you're at the fine cut stage where everything is pretty much locked in. You'll also be provided a field in which you can type notes to our team about what may be missing and what might be there. So you can type that it's a temporary score, temporary sound effects, temporary music, no VFX, etc. We've already reviewed action films that don't have the gun flashes or the blood yet. Obviously, our reviewers, if they can use their imaginations in reading the script, devising all of that action, they can certainly do it in post before that action's done. So from the moment you have an assembly, you can submit it for screening analysis. Another good question. All right, next question is, this is a very similar question. How done does my cut need to be in order for your reviewers to check it out? So again, as soon as you have a rough cut, we are excited to take a look. Next question is, does screening analysis have an impact on financial analysis? Can screening analysis be included as part of financial analysis? Yes. So you can buy just screening analysis if you're most interested in getting feedback from reviewers. You can also buy a bundle for $1,000. So for the price of 2 screenings, you can get screening analysis and financial projections on your film. You do need either a script or screening score to run financial projections. And I won't do a super deep dive on what the financial product looks like, but for those of you who are pretty familiar with the platform, you know that financial analysis allows filmmakers to run studio style financial projections on their film, where we simulate theatrical release on a certain number of screens with a certain marketing spend. And then we also generate some ancillary revenue for you to help filmmakers understand what their film's odds are of recouping their budget. And it's not a single snapshot of your logline good, your logline bad. It's actually incredibly dynamic. Not only does our model look at a database of over 10,000 released films and compare your film to it, but it's also looking at all of the nuances in your film, which is why we require script or screening analysis to see what type of story your film is, what is the genre, what are the themes in it, and then beyond that, who's making it on your team tab? Who's your director? What's her or his background? Who's your producer? Who are the stars? And for any elements that you don't yet have, you can still get financial analysis because we have an assumptions-based system, meaning that we will make assumptions based on what we do know about your film to determine what is the likely strength of the producer who's going to be producing it if you don't have a producer on board yet. Or another big one is if you don't have a distributor on board yet, which most independent films don't at the script or screening stage, then we'll make some assumptions around the size and caliber of distributor that might be releasing your film in order to guess at a theatrical release pattern and how much revenue your film can earn. Even beyond that, you yourself, the filmmaker, can suggest different distributors, can suggest different actors, and see how the model dynamically responds to that package and as you change it. That includes changes to budget. And budget, obviously, is a mega huge factor in whether or not your film recoups and is profitable. So all of this is part of financial analysis. Financial analysis does require script or screening analysis. Script or screening analysis does not require financial analysis. So if you just want to dip your toe in the water for $4.95, you can absolutely do that and get a screening score. I really highly recommend it if you have a completed film. I will say this now, and for I don't know for how much longer after this video is posted will it be true, but at least as we sit here today, if you get a high screening score, you're definitely going to be hearing from our executive producer service team. We're going to reach out and see how we can help you where you're at and what your needs are. Next question is, oh, that's more of a compliment. Thank you. They write, telling me in advance that my movie will be brilliant is great. Awesome. Oh, here's the question. It was entered separately. But if my movie gets bad scores, is there much help or advice provided on how to improve it? Great question. Great compliment. Great question. Thank you. So yes. So there's 10 pages of feedback. And if I had the courage to switch over to my to share my screen and show you a live, should I do it? Let's do it. I'm going to try to show a live film page to you right now. Is this possible? Here it is. Great, that was our last slide. So here's an example of a film that we did that I didn't go over in our webinar walkthrough. And here is what the screening analysis tab looks like. Hoping you can all see that. So here you'll see this is a very interesting example because reviewer 1 recommended this film. Reviewer 2 chose to consider it in its current rendition, and reviewer 3 passed. So in this case, we saw that just in the screening analysis, there was some polarization with how the audience was responding to it. And this was really valuable. You know, a lot of filmmakers say, hey, what the heck? My reviewers aren't all agreeing. And, you know, I always try to find helpful and polite ways of saying, that's sort of the point. The point is to allow people to review the project independently so that they can each arrive at their own independent conclusion so that you can get a sense, not just of how one person responds or how one company responds, but how a broader community of people can respond. And in fact, with this particular film, it's just under fresh, according to the critics. Should that surprise you? This is a broad goofy comedy. It's a fun time. And for anyone who's seen the trailer, I mean, for me anyway, there are laugh out loud moments in the trailer. I probably would have been a recommend on this because it's just a fun time. Now, are hoity-toity film critics necessarily going to give their seal of approval to this when their brand is on the line? Maybe not. But you know what we saw with audiences? They loved it. I think there's something like an 85 or higher audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It's a fresh film as far as audiences are concerned. And we could have seen that from the screening analysis, which again was done quite a while before the film was theatrical release. This is another example of a film that got a theatrical release because of Slated's executive producer services, which boarded the film in post and made the introduction to a number of sales companies and distributors, one of whom said, not only do I want this film, but I have a specific idea of how to release it in specific markets, and I can do that theatrically in the midst of a pandemic, which was quite successful, and I think all parties are thrilled. To your question, do you get feedback? Yeah. So if you wanted to listen to this passing reviewer, you can go down and see what they have to say. Here's all the metadata on the film. And here are the reader bios. And here's reviewer 3's feedback. So you can see here that they have multiple paragraphs here that they write each time. It's about 3 to 4 pages per reviewer, and there's 11 categories. So it takes a while. Honestly, it takes a while. And one of the reasons why we have such an incredible team of reviewers is because you sort of have to be a Navy SEAL of reviewing material in order to watch something, go through these 11 paragraphs. You use citations, and you notice here, these are time codes from the film that they use in 8 out of the 11 categories, and be really specific about backing up not just all of your opinions, but backing up why you're giving the scores you're giving. So absolutely, not only do you get 3 pages of feedback from every single reviewer, so you can understand, for instance, why this reviewer felt like there wasn't enough conflict in this film, but you'll get time codes. So you'll know exactly where they had those issues. Here is minute 56, where they wanted a more major setback for this character winning a particular bout in the tournament, right? So there are ways, of course, while you're probably not going to rewrite the script, and most independent films don't have budgets for reshoots, there are definitely ways to look at scenes and say, how could we make this feel more tense? How can we provide more tension in the scene by the way that it's edited? If you are an editor, if you have a lot of experience in post, you know that you can fundamentally change the level of tension in a film through the editing and according to what you cut to. So while you're not going to overhaul the conflict altogether, if you felt like this particular reviewer had some decent points, there may be things that you could do to spruce it up. Less so in tone, perhaps, but definitely the case in pacing. And pacing, we've seen, is an example of a category that is very, very malleable in post. We see this with the 10,000 scripts we've covered. Pacing matters for the read. It matters when we're sending material out to producers and investors, how fast do they get through the read. But it doesn't really correlate with the pacing of the film, because that's the editor's job. The editor's job is really to rewrite the whole movie, rewrite the flow of the whole movie and the cadence of the whole film. So some of these categories are more malleable than others in post, but in all cases, you'll have tons and tons of feedback. You see, we have the same level of feedback from reviewer 2 as well, who gave it a consider, and you'll have lots of stuff to process and decide if you agree with it and if you want to make any changes, or if you're pretty pleased with the high screening score that you've got. Okay, a buyer asks, how can I see all of your top scoring completed films, and can you make me aware of those somehow? So yes, absolutely. If you're not already an investor, or if you don't have investor status or buyer status on Slated, I highly recommend that you go to the platform and apply to be an investor. If you're already a member, it's as simple as going to your member profile settings and checking the box that says, I'm an investor, which will begin the verification process of our film finance team reaching out to you, asking questions, asking you to fill out a short survey, and verifying that you are indeed able to invest in films and understand what that means. Or if you're a buyer, we're going to be having a conversation with you about what films you're looking to buy and how those deals typically work. Once you have investor or buyer status on the platform, we will begin automatically sharing material with you. So there's a matchmaking system on the platform. Once you're on and you have those tags, you're going to be matched with films that are looking for buyers and sales companies automatically. It's part of our very robust and intelligent matchmaking system that exists on the platform. But beyond that, we have sort of a white glove service that we offer through Slated's executive producer team, where we are having conversations with filmmakers who have high scoring projects every single week. Every week we're having phone calls with new filmmakers. We're doing deals with those filmmakers to help them get whatever it is that they need. And then we're sharing that material in a targeted way, one-to-one emails with members of our investor and buyer community, and in some cases producer community, who have said, I'm looking for stuff like this. So if you're a buyer and you're looking for any film that's good or any genre film that's good, for instance, then absolutely apply. We'll start a conversation with you, and you're going to start receiving notifications from our film finance team, from our executive producer team, once a week, every other week, depending on how much of what you like we're taking out at any given time. We're often taking out a couple of completed films every single week, and probably a half dozen of movies at this point are actively going out through our EP team every single week. Another good question. Next question is, I run a post-production facility here in LA, and I'd like to offer this virtual test screening service to, I think I just unshared my screen. Thank you, whoever helped me do that. I run a post-production facility here in LA, and I'd like to offer this virtual test screening service for our clients to help them in post. Are you doing partnerships? Good question. Absolutely. Yes, we are. So we already have partnerships with a couple of financiers that we've worked with for some time. They're choosing to use our scoring system in the most recent case, no, in both cases actually, for all of the material that's submitted to them. So yes, absolutely, we're doing partnerships. Whatever your company is, if you're helping filmmakers at some scale, or you're looking to finance films or looking to distribute films, please reach out. It's as simple as clicking that little orange bubble on the bottom right-hand side. It's around here. Click it, and you'll be talking with literally one of us in probably no time at all, and we'll get you to the right place. But absolutely, we're doing partnerships. Our goal as a company is to help incredible independent films and studio films alike get made. So we're going to do that however we can. Thank you, Edward. Edward says, thank you, very informative. Really appreciate that, Edward. Okay, we have, a few more questions. Excellent. A technical question, what kind of environment are the testers viewing films in? On their laptops, a home style LCD screen, in a viewing theater with quality production and sound? We don't offer our reviewers theaters. This is a virtual screening, so they are watching it at home on the device of their choice. If you wanted to require them to watch it on like a big screen and not a tablet, we could certainly have a discussion about that request. You could make that request in the notes field when you're submitting your material. I don't think any of our reviewers are using phones, for instance. They're using televisions or medium-sized screens of some kind. We're definitely not doing theaters right now, and don't have plans to. I think that would increase the cost considerably if we were booking a theater. Then we might suggest that you just book the theater on your own, because the cost would probably be comparable. It is a virtual screening, so people are watching it in the comfort of their homes. So imagine that their viewing experience is going to be something similar to if they were watching your film on streaming, which we know for 99% of films is the case, is that they watch it on streaming. So it's going to be very comparable to how your audience will receive the film once it's released. Another good question, would you recommend doing screening analysis before I take my film out to festivals, or should I wait until I'm looking for distribution? That is the perfect question, and it gets to the heart of, I think, what is the biggest problem with that independent filmmakers face, which is that they start submitting to festivals too early. And while you should move expediently as soon as you've wrapped your movie, there should be an overarching strategy to your festival submission process. And ideally, you have partners on the film who have relationships at those festivals. A lot of filmmakers don't, perhaps they're so excited to have people watch their film, to get pats on the back, and to start traveling and debuting the film, that they don't consider the downside to debuting at the wrong festival, or the downside of submitting to a major festival when you don't have a relationship there. The biggest festivals in the world, the festivals that are headline making, that can make a huge difference for your film if it debuts there, they get thousands, and in some cases tens of thousands of submissions every year. And it's not that every film they debut isn't incredible. Every film they debut at these major festivals is usually awesome, but they may not be able to give the full consideration to every single submission in the same way. So they do look for signals in most cases of, of films where they know the filmmaker has a proven track record. There's someone on the film that they can recognize, or there's something to indicate to them that film is going to be a higher value submission. So we recommend working with sales partners in advance, choosing your sales partner first, and then having a conversation with that sales partner about where the best festivals to debut are. In some cases, your sales partner or your distributor is going to have relationships at those festivals. So while they can't ensure that your film will screen at a particular festival, they can at least make sure that it gets a really good look. They can put a phone call in or an email in to make sure that the festival knows the submission is coming from their company, or that at least they're on the project. So that can, in many cases, dramatically increase your odds of getting in to the right festival and debuting at the right festival. You want to make that decision pretty carefully, because what happens in many cases is not only do filmmakers submit to a ton of festivals and then they're rejected from Sundance and Tribeca. Well, would your film have necessarily gotten into Sundance and Tribeca? I don't know, maybe if you had a sales company on it that was higher profile making calls for you. But the point now is that after about 8 or 9 months of waiting to hear back from festivals, you have nothing but rejections, and that harms the value of your film. So let's not do that. Once you have a cut that you can submit screening analysis to, or even if you don't want screening analysis, please reach out to us and have a conversation. We'll help you make the best choices at the best possible time. Okay, next question is, with your executive producer service, are you active, hands-on, making phone calls, or is it more of an analytics and advisory role? That's a good question. I would say it's something in between. We're definitely active. It takes a ton of our time. We're also advising, and we also ask that our filmmakers use the analytics to inform the decisions that they're making. So I would say in most cases, what it looks like is when your film scores well, we're going to hop on a phone call and we're going to ask where you're at. What do you want on the film? What are your needs? And what are you hoping to achieve with this particular movie? Is it just distribution? Do you also need finishing funds? Are you at some earlier stage where you need some packaging elements? Whatever it is, we're going to assess our ability to help. We'll strike a deal with you based on what your needs are. That's our executive producer service deal. We'll send that over to you as a deal memo so that we can get started. And from that point forward, we're going to do what we said we would do. So in some cases, that means that you're sending us director lists. We're helping you pick the best director. We're sometimes using analytics to do that, or we're helping you package your film. A lot of filmmakers know who big name actors are, but they may not have a relative sense of the value of actors who aren't household names. How do I make a choice between these two, premium streaming actors, for instance, when I don't necessarily know what their value is from a theatrical standpoint? So that's where analytics and Slated's EP team can be helpful. How you package your movie at the packaging stage is critical. And unless you have a big agent with a lot of clients who also happens to have a lot of time for you, then chances are you're probably a little bit in the dark about the best way to package your film for your budget. So we definitely advise on that stuff to make sure that you're attaching the right people at the right time. Packaging is one example that's sort of time intensive, but we do expect you to do the legwork as producers. So it is a partnership in that way. We can introduce you to casting directors, put you on the phone with them if they respond to the material positively, to producers, put you on the phone with them. And of course, if we board at a stage where you need financing, we'll also be sharing the film, whether it's in post or at some earlier stage with our investor community. When those investors respond positively, we'll introduce you on a phone call and see if that partnership is one worth pursuing. So yeah, it's very hands-on. It's very time intensive. And in fact, I'm pretty amazed and awestruck by our executive producer service team, which is headed up by Jay Burnley, our head of film finance, and Chelsea Tu and Jason Scoggins and Mitchell Sturhan. They really do an incredible job. You would think there was 50 of them based on how much work they're doing. So yes, it's pretty hands-on. I would say it's more hands-on than perhaps many agents are capable of being for all of their clients. At the same time, we expect you to do the work. We expect you to put the film together. We found that even when we're providing the best possible advice, if the producer is not a driving engine of the film, then there's not a whole lot we can do. We can advise on the best practices and what choices to make, and then we do count on the filmmakers to do that. The best success cases are ones in which the producer is actively working and we're actively working. It truly does take a village to make some of these independent films get made. So yes, analytics, advisory, phone calls, emails, we're doing all of the above. Next question, how do you calculate financial analysis with the budget and schedule? I wasn't asked for my film's budget when I paid for financial analysis. That's a really good question. So on your film page, there is a field for your budget. You can simply click that and enter your budget. What happens is if you purchase financial analysis and you haven't entered a budget, then when we go to run your financial analysis, we'll just reach out to you individually and say, hey, we were just about to run financial projections for your film. We noticed there's no budget. What is your budget? If it's relatively clear for us to know from the production elements in the script analysis, we may guess a range budget to start your simulations on and deliver that analysis to you. So for instance, while we're not line producers, we've seen tens of thousands of movies, we've taken out tens of thousands of movies, and we've helped finance dozens of movies. So we have a sense of the range of budgets of your film in most cases based off of the metadata in the script analysis. And if you haven't provided it, we may just start you at 2.5 or 1.5 or 5 or 10 based on what the elements of your film are. And if we're not clear, we'll reach out to you and ask. But in all cases, financial analysis is fluid, it's dynamic. You have unlimited simulations. You can run it as many times as you want. Once you've bought it, purchased it, it's free forever. So you can try the $5 million version. You can try the $2 million version. You can try the $10 million version and see how different versions of your film may perform. That feature has definitely informed how some of the films on the platform are getting packaged and structured financially. Wow, so we've been covering questions for a long time. This is fantastic. So we're coming up on our last question here. It's also about financial analysis. And Sam asks, with the financial analysis product, can we plug in any living name actor, or is it limited to a set that is registered in your platform in some manner? Yes, you can plug in any actor. I guess that they're living is probably a pretty important prerequisite. But yes, any actor that you want to plug in, you can plug in. We have data on a broad range of talent and directors and filmmakers. So if they're a member of Slated, then when you enter their name, they're going to pop right up with the face and the score, and you're going to have a sense, even as you're putting them in, what the relative value is, what the relative track record is. If they're not a member of Slated, then you'll enter their name and you'll add them to our database, at which point we're going to start to run analytics on that person, on their track record, and devise a score for you in real time. But whether they're a Slated member or not, you can still plug them into your package and see how they would impact your film's performance. Absolutely. I think that was the last question of the day. Thank you so much. We got over 15 questions, 16 questions. I really appreciate all of those. They were all incredible. I really appreciate everyone joining me today. I think that's going to wrap it up for today's brief webinar on screening analysis. If you have any other questions, though, please reach out to us. Again, we have customer service chat, that little orange bubble on the bottom right side of your screen. Talk to us about your film. If you have a completed film, if you're not sure about screening analysis, if you have questions about it, start a conversation with us and we'd be happy to help. I'm already getting some goodbyes. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you on the platform.